So, George, I went to go and see at a little press screening a film called Fly Me to the Moon, starring Scarlett Johansson, Channing Tatum. It's an Apple TV film, but again, consistent with a lot of them, you don't know it until you're watching the film and you see the little Apple logo.
Which I think is the way it should be.
And I think it's the way it should be. It's I think it's a streamer film that has been deemed worthy enough to get a cinematic release, and it's being pushed. It has a very smooth and brightly high-key lit poster, and it is a space race rom-com.
One of those.
It's an Apollo 11 crowd pleaser. So, here's the premise of it. We start in 1969. The space race is in full swing. The Russians have already beaten the Americans with the Sputniks to get the first man in space. Did they do it in 61?
The Russians?
Yeah.
What, Yuri Gagarin? I don't remember. I thought it was
early
60... No.
They got like 5-6 years on them, didn't they?
I think it was later. They might be 66, 67.
Phil,
it's been a while since I've delved into my space race.
Opening with montage of Space Race. JFK going, we choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard.
May I quit me?
May I quit me? Love a bit of JFK.
Yeah.
And so Scarlett Johansson plays Kelly Jones, a plucky advertising director who kind of has this sort of Mad Men scene where she's confronted with a room of male executives and she manages to convince them how they should do their advertising, and you never thought of it this way. She's also kind of a bit of a chancer, and she morally is a little bit ambiguous. She lies a lot to get what she needs. She hides the truth. She delivers an entire presentation with a fake pregnant belly to gain the sympathies of men and make this pitch for I think it was Ford at the time, and sort of this whole idea of like lying to get your advertising objectives through is part of like the great lie of the space race, and how do we market it? Do we fake it? All of that coming into play. She is then confronted by Woody Harrelson, played by Woody Harrelson, who is this shadowy FBI agent, and she asks, "What office do you even work for?" And he says, "The Oval. The Oval Office is the one I work for." And so she basically is tasked with the space race is costing, it's way over budget. It's costing billions of dollars, but she is tasked with marketing it to the American people, making it palatable, showing people why they need to keep funding it. And that's the job she takes on. Much to the dismay of Cole Davis, played by Channing Tatum, who is the NASA launch director of the Apollo missions. And there's all these conversations about, you need to start getting brands involved. We need to get media in here. We need to do interviews. But she is hiring actors to play the real life people and giving them interviews on late night shows. And they're like, that's not me, but they're like beautiful actors trying to sell it. The introduction of brands, Omega, all the foods, like I'd use this pen in space. All of a sudden, space branding is everywhere. It's also this subplot about how there is a very strong chance that the space race itself and the Apollo 11 mission would not succeed, but they wanted to create a set where they would potentially shoot the space race completely as if it was there. In case it didn't work, they would switch the feeds and go to this artificial representation of the space race. Loads of fun little nods to, your foil hat, references to Stanley Kubrick and the Zeiss lenses that were made that were meant to be shot in low light, which I think he ended up using on Barry Lyndon. These lovely little Zeiss lenses that he got paid in. Get your tinfoil hat on. So there's that. There's like nice little moments where Cole Davis is literally trying to shave off every single kilogram, every pound on that spaceship, because as it stands, it's overweight and they cannot get any more on there. But Kelly Jones is saying, we're going to film it. We're going to film the moon landing. You need to take a camera, you need to take a tripod, you need to take this. And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? I literally cannot fit anything else on this ship. And you're now telling me I need to add kilograms and pounds onto this vessel. That's going to delay us. It's never going to happen. And that's like the main point of contention. It's also a romance between these two. Okay, so...
Wow.
Yeah. Jeez. So this is not... a complicated character study, detailed representation of the space race.
It's not First Man.
It's not First Man from Damien Chazelle. It's not Apollo 13, where you got a really detailed sense of like how we got people into space. It's not a complex character study of what's going to happen. This is not going to be played in classrooms to talk about realistic conversations that happened in the thing. It is much more of a fun, and I think in the pursuit of being more fun, it rounds off its edges. It's a little bit woolly and a little bit soft and sanitized. Woody Harrelson's in there having fun. You know, he's talking to Channing Tatum because he's complaining, and he says, like, she's made you the belle of the ball. Why don't you just slip on your tutu and do some dancing? There's a problem with it. It just told me exactly what to think and exactly what to feel for its entire runtime. And ultimately, I was just a little bit bored. It doesn't have what I would quite like in terms of really giving me some details about the potentially faked scenario in a studio where they perfectly recreated the moon landing. But nothing about the film's conviction ever felt true, where I was constantly saying, this conversation never happened. I really don't believe that this absurd second project really happened in the way that this film was detailing. So ultimately that sort of drew me out of it. The romance element is there. I like Scarlett Johansson. I like Channing Tatum, but I never really swooned. It's a comedy, but I never really laughed. The stakes of will it, won't it work on Apollo 11 are ultimately not that important, because I know that Apollo 11 did work despite everything. But, you know, there is definitely a parallel story of what were the almost parts, what almost didn't happen, and what it chooses to go down for me just didn't work for me. It's a little bit soft and mushy, and I just had very little to do as an audience member. I don't think it's a bad film. I don't think anything about it is particularly unpleasant, but I just was there. You know what it was like? It was like chewing styrofoam. Just a little bit like I've got something in my mouth, but I'm getting nothing. American fruit. You know, you get a really shiny red apple.
Apologies, America.
Americans. Your fruit is sometimes really bad. It's like really shiny and slick and bright and smart.
Like a supermarket tomato.
Yes.
Big and red.
A British supermarket tomato.
There you go. We got one for a British supermarket tomato.
You
big and red, and you cut it open, it's just water.
Water, and there's nothing there. And then, you know, you forget how bad they are until you go to proper tomato countries.
It should be better than that. Surely with Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum together, like you'd expect. From what you're saying to me, so I was on holiday, I didn't get to see this film, but it makes me sad, because what it sounds like it should be is a film called Down with Love, which came out 20 years. Have you ever seen Down with Love?
No.
Again, set in the 60s. This came out in 2003. Set in the 60s, very much about the kind of is that second wave feminism in the 60s? That period of male. Ewan McGregor plays a sort of conservative, you know, very male dominated talk show host, I think, or conservative thinker. Meanwhile, Renée Zellweger is playing very sort of like proto-feminist, like pushing, you know, and she writes this book, Down with Love, and it's this kind of like they're opposites, and they're opposites on a divide that is cultural to the 60s in America, but also they're attracted to each other. It's really sparky, really funny, really camp, and I rewatched it recently, and I was like, that's a really great movie, and that's really, really fun, and that's what this film sounds like it should be, and it should be sparky. And I think that with the film you've just described, it sounds like it always should be the script that works. It needs to be zappy and zany. But if it's, you know, had its edges shaved off, which is so funny because you didn't get the tickets because they were sent to me, but even though you ended up going, the tickets were literally a circle.
Oh yeah, they were
the edges.
We got them when we came in. They were cool.
The edges were literally shaved off, and I'm like, oh, that's such a shame.
Shaved off.
They literally took the edges off the ticket.
You know, like the thing you reacted to the most is when I talked to you about like having to now pack a heavy camera on board a space shuttle. Like that to me is really interesting, and like there is a bit about it like you need to sell this $1 billion space race. Like that to me is the knotty detail I don't know that much about, but I think is really interesting. Essentially they fooled the American public by putting people on. This is what the film's told me, by the way, by putting people who aren't the real people on camera, who are better looking and more articulate, to sell the illusion of the space race, to make it really important. Like there's something really interesting there, and then faking that, like being ready to fake footage in a studio is also really interesting, and everyone gets their tinfoil hat on in a fun way. It's just in the pursuit of making a rom-com, you lost something that I think I'm more interested in. If somebody else wrote in and said, oh, do you know what? It was a really nice time. I laughed a little bit and it was quite a cozy film, I'd totally go, do you know what? Fair play. I just got teased by a bunch of other interesting things that weren't properly unpacked. And I think it just didn't quite land for me, pun intended. Yeah. Get it?
Well, that's Fly Me to the Moon. That's out this week in the UK.
TV. Oh, is it? No, it'll be... Yeah, sorry. It's a theatrical release.
It'll be theatrical release first, then at some point it'll be coming on Apple TV. Yeah. If you see it, let us know your thoughts. It'd be great to know that. If any of you have seen Down with Love as well, go watch that.
And I was, like, towards the end, I was nodding off almost. I did have to stop myself.
Did you?
Yes, yeah.
A little bit post-Glastonbury, though, I think that might have been.
That's true. It was the Tuesday after Glastonbury. But I was ready to watch the film.
How long is it?
I think it's on the long side. Let me just double check.
That film looks like it should be on the short side.
Yeah. Fly Me to the Moon. Runtime, stand by. It's 2 hours 11 minutes.
Oh, way too long.
That's long.
That's criminal.
That is long. And just look at the branding there. Sorry for people who can't
Yeah.
see. Do you know what I mean? It's very high key, very swooshy. They basically could be leaning against the moon, doing a McConaughey lean, like really there. It's not terrible. It wasn't unpleasant. I just am not like buzzing about it. It's going to completely go from my mind. In a few years, you'll go, do you remember Fly Me to the Moon? And I'll go, wow, yeah, remember that film?
I had another forgotten film,
Oh,
by the way.
please, yes.
The Charlie's Angels reboot they did in 2019
Yes,
with Kristen
great
Stewart.
one.
Like, what the
Fantastic.
hell happened there?
Yeah.
I think it might have even come out in January 2020, maybe.
Did
but
anyone see that?
Vapor.
Oh, God, it
Just
really did.
passed through you.
Yeah.
Just gone. Anyway, that's another forgotten film.
You know what film I saw the other day that's completely forgotten?
Go
Do
on.
you remember I Am Number 4 with Alex Pettifer?
Oh, yes. And Diana Agron at peak Glee time. Wow.
And Alex Pettifer's an actor I think is solid, but I'll see him every 4 or 5 years.
I'm yet to see a performance that convinces me. Very handsome.
He's a good looking guy.
But I'm yet to see a performance where I go, put him in more. Do you remember Magic Mike, where like it starts as his film, and then it just becomes Channing Tatum, and you're like, what happened to that character that we started the film with? And he just sort of is in the background.
That film had no story but really good cinematography, and so it leads you to think that there's something really much more interesting going on when it keeps you going. That film. Anyway, sorry, complete tangent. Sorry.
There you go. That was Fly Me to the Moon.